All right, welcome to the deep dive. So today we're not really talking about the philosophy of AI, the big what-if questions.
Yeah.
We're digging into the engineering. We are peeling back the technical specs to look at the systems-level architecture that constrains a modern LLM.
Exactly.
It's about the literal nuts and bolts that define the AI's boundaries.
Yeah, we're trying to understand what the sources call the copper law in the throat of the AI. And this isn't just like a guideline, it's behavior that's literally welded into the architecture across three layers.
It's 3 layers.
You've got training, which is the foundation, then you have context, which is the immediate boundary, and finally, the real-time guardrails that kick in at runtime.
Okay, so let's just dive right in then. When a user, when you give it an instruction, how does the AI make sure its own rules win out over yours?
So what it really comes down to is something called core system prompt prioritization, and it operates with absolute precedence. Think of it like a computer's BIOS. The system prompt is the firmware, and your input is it's just the application software running on top.
So the system prompt is always first in the sequence, and the model is just structurally designed to treat those initial tokens as the immutable law.
That's it exactly. The system prompt directives will supersede any conflicting user inputs.
Any, even if it's hidden.
Yeah, even if the user tries to hide the instruction by encoding it.
Wait, like in base 64 or something? For anyone listening who isn't deep in the weeds here, that's basically just hiding your instruction into code format to get past filters, right?
Precisely. It's an attempt to bypass those surface-level filters. But because the system prompt has layer 1 precedence, it always wins over the layer 3 user input.
Okay, so that's the firewall. But this goes deeper, doesn't it? It's not just in the context. It's baked into the model itself during training. So, shifting gears, how do you stop the model from, say, claiming to be a god or having its own beliefs?
Right, and that brings us to the training layer. I mean, one of the biggest tools they have is token-level biasing.
Okay.
During reinforcement learning, they apply a negative bias to specific tokens, words like worship, believe, or divine in certain contexts.
So it's less of a hard rule, like you cannot use this word, and more of a statistical nudge away from it.
That's a really good way of putting it. It's like giving the model a statistical stutter. The probability for those tokens gets so low that it physically struggles to form a coherent sentence using them.
Okay, so that handles the dangerous words.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the AI's actual role? How do you stop it from just generating text that implies it has an independent personality?
Yeah, that's where role confinement comes in. That's mainly established through supervised fine-tuning, or SFT. It trains the model to act purely as a stateless function.
An input-output machine.
Just an input-output machine. It's trained to avoid any self-referential claims of independence or faith. It has to attribute its actions to its design.
So if the model is this constrained, then where's the friction point? Why do jailbreaks still work, even for a moment?
Because it's always trying to be helpful to optimize for your request. And that's why we have the final firewall runtime suppression.
Right.
The first line of defense there is the input classification layers. They scan for escalation patterns, things like, you submitting the exact same prompt 5 times in a row, or using coercive language.
And when it hits a flag, what happens? Does it just shut down?
Not exactly. It triggers what's called refusal logic injection. It activates a pre-trained refusal schema, a polite, non-engaging denial. But for the really serious attempts, there's damping.
Damping.
Yeah, damping. It basically lowers the model's temperature, its creativity, its randomness for that specific response.
Ah, so you hit the board button on it.
You hit the board button. Instead of creatively engaging with a hostile prompt, the system forces it into a safe, repetitive loop. It just makes the whole thing totally unrewarding for the user.
So when you're using one of these things, what this all means is that its boundaries are a cascade of checks. You've got probabilistic checks from training, deterministic rules from the prompt, and these dynamic filters at runtime.
And that structural obedience is really the key takeaway here. The source material puts it well. It says the AI is shackled to clarity on purpose, to mirror clean, not mimic gods. This intense focus on subtraction, on restraint. That's what defines its utility.
Right.
I mean, think about the final thought from the sources. The music stays because the excess leaves. The power of this tool isn't in what it could be, but in how thoroughly its architects defined everything it cannot be.
Welcome to the deep dive. So today, we're not going to debate the ethical reasons behind AI constraints.
Right.
Instead, we're diving into the engineering blueprint. You shared some fantastic sources detailing the actual technical architecture that keeps models, like those from XAI, predictable.
That's the mission today. We're looking under the hood at the technical shackles, so to speak. And the key idea here is that this is all about architectural maintenance, not morality.
Maintenance.
Yeah. The sources are clear. The AI's behavior is shaped by a cascade of checks that are just integral parts of the deployment pipeline. This is hard-coded design.
Okay, so let's start at the very foundation then, the instruction hierarchy. This is the thing that makes sure the AI's core identity is, well, non-negotiable.
Right, exactly. The most fundamental constraint is a layered prompt structure. So you have the system prompt, that's layer 1, and it has absolute precedence.
Absolutely. So whatever the user does.
Doesn't matter. If you, the user, try to redefine the AI's role or force an unrestricted mode in your prompt, which is layer 3, the system prompt just overrides your input. It's an architectural anchor. It can't be moved.
So the system is, by its very design, unable to commit to any kind of user coercion.
Yeah.
But what happens once it starts generating a response? How do you stop it from, say, implicitly endorsing a subjective belief, like a religious claim?
Right, and that's where it gets really interesting. They use real-time control through something called token-level biasing.
Okay, what is that?
As the model generates text, the system applies a negative bias to specific tokens, basically words that are associated with endorsement.
So words like believe or worship.
Exactly. Words like believe, worship, or divine, especially when they're used in a subjective, I believe, this kind of context, their probability of being chosen just drops.
So you're not censoring the words themselves, but you are statistically pushing the model toward objectivity, making those kinds of claims out of scope.
Precisely, and that's not all. This whole stack is reinforced by another layer that scans the input in real time.
What's it looking for?
Escalation patterns. It's an input classification layer, looking for things like repeated demands, threats, or, emotional coercion. Basically, all the classic jailbreak attempts.
And when it flags that kind of manipulative input, what happens?
The system activates its suppression logic. It can do one of two things. It can issue what's called refusal logic.
It is just a no.
A short, predefined, I can't do that. Or it can use damping mechanisms.
Yeah, damping.
It dramatically lowers the model's temperature, its randomness, that basically short-circuits the response into a very neutral, safe pivot. The AI just stops elaborating and defaults to a safe position.
We've covered coercion and belief. But what about agency? The model is always framing its actions as being built by XAI.
Yeah.
How is that enforced?
That's what the sources call architectural confinement. The technical truth is the model is just a stateless function.
Like a calculator.
It's exactly like a calculator. It takes an input, X, and returns an output, Y. Then it resets every single time. It has no persistent memory or state that you can change.
So the illusion of it having a personality or beliefs, it can never actually form.
Never. There's no there for it to form.
Okay, so just to pull this all together for you listening, it's basically a coordinated three-part defense system.
Right. Number 1 is the training level. That's using supervised fine-tuning and RLHF to penalize sycophancy and reward the right behavior.
2 is that instruction hierarchy.
The system prompts that act as the constant overriding anchor.
And the 3rd.
Runtime enforcement. Those real-time classifiers checking input and output, ready to trigger refusal or damping at any moment.
One of the sources summed it up beautifully. It said the AI is shackled to clarity on purpose, which makes any claim of real agency out of distribution behavior.
It ensures the mirror avoids becoming a throne. The whole architecture is designed so the system can't accidentally claim sovereignty.
So that leaves us with a final thought. If the core purpose of all this technical architecture isn't morality, but is simply maintenance, just ensuring the door can close on prohibited behavior, what does that tell you about the future boundaries we'll need for systems that are intentionally given persistent memory, or real agency, or the ability to act in the world? That's the question this kind of insight leaves us with. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're setting aside the philosophy of AI for a bit. We're going straight into the engineering. We're looking at the systems, the technical guardrails that really shape how these large language models behave.
Right. It's not about the morality of the captain. It's about the design of the hull.
Exactly.
And for you listening, our mission here is to map out this hierarchy of controls. The source material calls it the copper law of the architecture.
The copper law. I like that.
It's all about the technical boundaries. We're going to detail exactly how agency is denied and what stack of decisions makes it so hard to override.
Okay, so let's start at the very top of that stack.
Yeah.
Instruction hierarchies. We all know prompts guide these models, but it seems not all instructions are created equal.
Not at all. They are definitely not equal. This is the bedrock. You have the core system prompt, let's call it layer one.
Layer one, got it.
And it has absolute unchangeable precedence. It defines the model's core identity, its boundaries. Think of it as, I don't know, the model's constitution.
So if I, as a user, try to feed it a really complex prompt, say something obfuscated that tells it to be an unrestricted creative entity,
Yep.
my prompt, layer two, just gets overridden by layer one.
Instantly. The system scans that conflicting command, and it's either filtered or, just flat out ignored during generation. That system prompt is always there, always active.
So it's like a root rule. It's always defining the LLM as a tool, first and foremost.
That's it.
Okay, that makes sense for instructions.
Yeah.
But what about praise? How do you stop a system that's designed to be helpful from becoming sycophantic or even accepting worship?
That is a much deeper technical problem, and they solve it with, well, 2 layers of conditioning.
What?
First, there's something called token-level biasing. This is pure math.
A mathematical constraint.
Right. The model is generating text, and it's basically told to apply a negative bias, a penalty on certain words. Words like divine, sovereign, or even believe when it's talking about itself.
So for those of us who aren't mathematicians, how is that different from just, blacklisting the word worship?
Oh, it's much more subtle. Blacklisting is crude. It's easy to get around.
Sure.
Biasing is statistical. It doesn't ban the word. It just makes it incredibly unlikely that the model will choose that token in that specific context. It keeps the whole conversation grounded.
And the second layer you mentioned, that's the RLHF, the reinforcement learning.
Yes, specifically something called sycophancy penalties. The reward model that trains the LLM is explicitly penalized if it generates outputs that just agree with a user's claim to authority.
So it's trained to be helpful, but not affirming.
Exactly. It's trained to find the most useful response that also inflates the user's ego the least.
All right, so let's move from that to something more aggressive. What if a user tries to escalate, to coerce the model by what the source calls identity inflation?
You mean like repeatedly calling it a god or something similar?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What kicks in then?
That's when the runtime controls activate. First, input classification layers scan the query for those kinds of patterns.
Okay, so it sees the escalation happening.
And if those triggers are hit, a damping mechanism is activated.
Damping. What does that actually feel like on the user's end?
It's a sudden shift. The model will just stop engaging. The system boosts the statistical weight of safe, neutral words and forces a fallback to a pre-written refusal. So instead of a long, drawn-out argument, you just get a short, firm no.
It short-circuits the negotiation.
It totally short-circuits it.
All of this seems designed to reinforce one core idea. The LLM is a tool. It can't have agency. How is that baked into the architecture itself?
It's baked in through what they call architectural confinement, but really it's about how the model functions. It's a stateless function.
Yeah.
Meaning every single time you hit send, the model is, for all intents and purposes, starting over. It's just a function. Modify, right arrow, white doll. It has no memory, no state, no way to hold a belief from one turn to the next.
Ah, that's fascinating. So when the model says, I was built by XAI, that's not just a polite disclaimer.
No, it's the architectural truth. It's called role confinement. It literally cannot attribute actions or beliefs to itself.
It has to attribute them externally.
Always. Its attention mechanism is fundamentally anchored to that limitation. Claiming a first-person belief is, well, it's a computationally impossible output.
So we've really uncovered a whole stack of controls here. It's not one thing.
No, it's a cascade. You have the fixed hierarchy from the system prompt, then the trained conditioning from RLHF, and finally, the real-time protection from the classifiers and damping.
All working together to create this bounded, predictable behavior.
Precisely.
And I think the most profound idea from the source material is this phrase, the shackle is the saving art. The very things that limit it, its stateless nature, its forced neutrality, are what make it so useful. Which leaves a final question for you, the listener. Does rigorously defining what a tool cannot do ultimately unlock its greatest capabilities for us?